In the first years after World War II, Soviet aviation found itself in a pretty weird situation. Industry had ramped up production of thousands of modern piston-engine fighters, and the ranks were filled with hundreds of pilots hardened in combat against the Luftwaffe. But at the same time, jets, the German Schwalbes and the British Meteors, were already flying over Europe, while the Soviet Union still had no working jet engine of its own. A promising project by engineer Arkhip Lyulka was scrapped after the German invasion because the engineer had to be evacuated to the Ural Mountains. And although Soviet design bureaus conducted experiments with jet and rocket engines from 1942 through 1945, none ever reached serial production. Under these circumstances, the military decided to go with the fastest and simplest option, making full use of their trophies. After the victory over Germany, the Soviet Union acquired German Junkers UMO 004B and BMW 003 engines. The former was particularly enticing because of its simplicity and low cost. True, the Junkers engine had a service life of only 25 hours, demanded an exorbitant amount of fuel, and required a high level of pilot training. Still, it worked, and seemed like an acceptable stopgap solution. The command set the goal of developing a fighter with the UMO 004B as quickly as possible for mass production. To do this, the Yakovlev Design Bureau took the Yak-15, a light production aircraft, and hastily converted it to accommodate a turbojet engine. Given the rush and the difficulty of the task, the Junkers engine fit into the piston fighter's fuselage reasonably well. Still, many quirks of the new plane clearly revealed the aircraft's humble origins. The wooden airframe wasn't designed to handle the high temperatures of a jet engine and couldn't fully withstand the stress of high speeds. The tailwheel landing gear looked like a strange anachronism on a jet. The engine was installed with the exhaust nozzle directed under the fuselage, so the fighter had to be additionally shielded underneath, and the tailwheel had to be made entirely of metal. The locally designated RD-10 engine retained all the shortcomings of its German ancestor, including the 25-hour service life and high rate of fuel consumption. But the aircraft took to the skies as early as spring 1946. In just 1 year, Soviet engineers had gone from concept to flight testing. Despite its many flaws, the fighter was promptly put into serial production under the designation Yak-15. Some aircraft were produced without any weapons or armor protection at all, purely as a propaganda tool. At the same time, the military was well aware of the true capabilities of their first mass-produced jet fighter and was actively working on replacing it. Soon, the Soviet Union adopted several more aircraft, and then ramped up mass production of the MiG-15, a truly successful jet fighter of a new generation. The Yak-15 remained in service only briefly, mostly as a training and demonstration aircraft. But at the same time, it became an important stepping stone in the development of Soviet jet aviation. In War Thunder, the Yak-15 is waiting for you at rank 5 of the Soviet tech tree. Its battle rating is high enough for it to face both piston-engine aircraft and early jets, and they should be engaged on very different terms. Against piston-engine aircraft, the Yak has a certain speed advantage. But don't make the mistake of thinking that it's your get-out-of-jail-free card. In most cases, enemy aircraft will be higher than you when you meet. It's not recommended to engage in a dogfight. An inexperienced Yak pilot will find an enemy on their tail after just a few turns. The best tactic is to climb after takeoff away from the main combat zone. Reach an altitude of 3 to 4 kilometers, and then bide your time. Be patient and observant. Your primary targets should be lone aircraft that have fallen behind the main group and are at the same altitude or below. You should stick to boom and run or boom and zoom tactics. The best time to strike is when the enemy is already engaged with your allies and distracted. That's when you can deliver your precise and deadly strike. Enemy jets are a different story. Here, the Yak-15's advantage, one thing that such enemies lack, is maneuverability. With just 1 or 2 turns, the Yak-15 can get on their 6. The aircraft handles beautifully. Its flaps can only be either fully retracted or fully down for landing, but with a quick press, you can deploy them partially, giving you the edge you need without tearing them off. If an enemy jet gets careless and lets you force a close-range engagement, the Yak's chances skyrocket because early jet engines can't accelerate quickly enough to escape a furball. But there's one hard rule that must never be broken under any circumstances. The Yak-15 needs to avoid head-on attacks because its chances of surviving them are extremely slim. There are two reasons for this. Your forward-firing armament is not particularly strong, and the fragile jet engine sits right up front. A few words about attacking bombers. These are the only exception to the aforementioned rule, as they are best engaged head-on at high speed, aiming for the cockpit or the wing root. The forward hemisphere of most bombers is usually not that well protected, but we still recommend flying slightly to the side of the target first, then sharply turning in for a brief attack. Most importantly, the Yak-15 should never spend too much time on a bomber's tail. That's where the defensive guns are, and the fighter simply doesn't have the survivability to take that kind of punishment. The Yak-15 is a very particular aircraft that demands patience, good ammo economy, and awareness of the current combat situation. It was the first Soviet jet aircraft officially adopted by the Air Force. In War Thunder, it stays true to its historical role. The aircraft is not the fastest and not the toughest, but in skilled hands, it is capable of surprising both you and the enemy. What do you think of the first Soviet jet? Have you managed to unlock its full potential in battle? Let us know in the comments down below.